Back in the middle of May, I shared a photo that stirred up a fair bit of angst among the reptile community, followed a month and a half later by the result of that photo. This video is kind of a thing in two parts. One, talking about how to actually breed and then raise baby snakes. And two, dealing with the controversy that comes with a really sore topic in herpetoculture, and that is hybrids, particularly hybrids involving endangered species. And this is one of the animals that was featured, and he's become a bit of a handful. He's very, very food focused for reasons unknown. Gonna go check out the sphagnum bowl there. But you can find his video on the species on the channel already. Rebel is quite the handful, quite the large snake too. 6-something feet long at the moment. And he loves getting into places that he's not supposed to be. And making a mess of things. But we only have one bull snake here. And the other is this big black inquisitive creature. Selah, the black pine snake. I don't think we have a video of her on the channel just yet, although you can see her in photos and vids on social media. We'll eventually get to that, but this was the female involved in the cross. Black pine snake, classed as threatened currently on the federal endangered species list, and similarly in the two states where it's found, which is Alabama and Mississippi. But once again, only have one of these, and we're not entirely sure if she's actually suitable for breeding with pure species. And you can see that little tail there. That's one reason why she has little kinks there. So, in an attempt to test whether or not she is a viable breeder, and to get a sense for how these guys actually breed in the first place, I paired her with the bull snake. Now this brings up a few controversial notions that we'll get to after we talk about dealing with the eggs. Now breeding itself isn't all that hard. When they're in their prime ready to go, that's usually mid to late spring, so around here, what are you doing, girl? That is my sleeve. They're burrowers, so she's trying to find places to burrow down there. But in the mid to late spring, the male will go out looking for females. The female will bulk up and start to ovulate. You can actually feel those in her when she's getting ready to breed. And you put them together, and the male, it can sometimes look kind of like a bit of a harsh affair, you could say, because frequently the male will actually bite onto the neck of the female in order to hold on to her while they're mating. Not all snakes do this, but it's not uncommon in a lot of species. But they will do that, and they will copulate for up to a couple of hours before going their separate ways. After that point, it's you feed the female heavily, make sure she's getting all the nutrients, all the vitamins and such that she needs in order to produce healthy eggs, which sometimes might include adding a bit of extra calcium to her diet. And after about 6 to 8 weeks, she will look for a nesting site, usually a nice, moist, enclosed area where she will settle down and drop eggs. Now, once you get the breeding done, dealing with the eggs is actually kind of the easy part of raising babies. So you have to get a non-rotating incubator. So a lot of incubators might be built with racks inside that will actively turn eggs if you're working with a lot of bird eggs. You don't want that with snakes, so you want something that you can just kind of heat up and leave the container in there. So I use this kind of brand of incubator. It's got the digital control here. It's set at about 83.5 degrees. Sometimes it'll go up to 84. If it fluctuates a little bit, that's not a bad thing. It can actually be good to actually induce a little bit of that change, because it can sometimes result in stronger babies. But Roughly low to mid 80s is the incubation temperature best for a lot of different snake species, particularly a lot of these colubrids. And that goes into a heat coil there that heats up things. And then inside, the eggs themselves, you can see the actual temperature probe I have inside the incubation box that I have the eggs inside. So that is measuring the temperature directly where the eggs actually are, so that they are getting the most accurate readings. And also, you always kind of want to double check what temperature that the incubator is actually sitting at. We have a laser thermometer here that I can use to actually take readings to determine if this is at the temperature it's supposed to be. But with these guys, the eggs themselves are set into a bed of slightly moist sphagnum moss here. I use sphagnum partly because it's a medium that I have on hand usually, what with growing a lot of carnivorous plants. So I always have this ready, but it retains a fair amount of moisture. You can maintain it at any various levels of moisture as well. This is just barely moist, and you don't really need it any more than that because the enclosed environment will keep in the humidity, and you don't want the eggs sitting in water, but you want to make sure that high humidity is kept up. So this holds in just enough. You can put extra water around the edges as it dries out a bit so that it soaks through the medium. Other people may use perlite or vermiculite, which also, again, can hold a lot of moisture without being soggy, and will just kind of keep the eggs in a nice, humid, moist medium without soaking them. But one benefit of sphagnum generally is also because it is slightly acidic, it also tends to be an antibacterial, antifungal option. So it will actually reduce the risk of things growing on the eggs. Now, from that photo that you saw, Selah laid 6 eggs originally. One of them was not fertile, and after about a week and a half, it started showing signs. There was stuff growing on it. It started smelling, so we removed that one. You want to do that in order to make sure that just in case, it's not likely that a bad egg will affect any of the good eggs, but you want to take it out there just in case there's anything that could potentially jump over to the healthy eggs. Now, this is just for space. I have actually separated all the eggs. When they are laid, they actually glue together and kind of hold as a clump. That kind of helps the eggs to keep them rotating, because generally reptile eggs, since they're just laid in the ground and left there, they will not rotate while they are incubating. So I separate them just so that I can lay them flat in this area and keep an eye on each one of them. But if you have a big enough container, a big enough space, you can leave them clumped together and just let them hatch as is. These are close enough still, though, that they may actually touch a little bit underneath this first layer of moss. There's some suggestions that actually the active touching of the eggs may also improve sociability of the animals, believe it or not. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done with that, but this is generally the easy part. You keep this moist, you keep the temperature stable, and then you just wait. All right, this is going to take anywhere between 55 and like 85 days, depending on temperature, depending on the individual genetics of the animals, before the eggs hatch. Throughout that time, up until the last couple of days, you want to, whenever you check the eggs, you want to see them nice and round and firm. You don't want to see any deflation. Now, just before they hatch, you may see the eggs begin to deflate, and at that point, that's okay, because they're starting to kind of, water is moving into the animal that's inside instead, and it's getting out of the egg, and they're relying less on the surface of the egg to breathe for them. They're getting ready to do it on their own. So when it deflates right at the end, that's normal. And when that happens, you'll see that in the next part here. Or at least the part just after this. What I'm going to show you here real quick is something called candling. If we hold a bright light up to the egg, and you look very closely there, you can actually see those red veins running through the inside of the egg. Those veins are attached to the inner surface of the egg, and that is how the embryo is actually breathing, exchanging gases straight through the porous shell here. That's why it's so important for these eggs to stay moist, because unlike a hard-shelled bird egg, they pass water and gases and a few other things actually directly through the shell, and in that, by absorbing water and carbon and oxygen and such, you may actually watch the eggs grow slightly over the course of their development period. Now let's see. So you can see very closely, you can see the red veins just inside the egg there as these guys grow, ever so slowly. Any good egg will, from generally the first day or two after being laid, immediately start showing those veins. They can sometimes be hard to see, as in this guy, but if you look closely, they are still present. A bad egg will have no such thing showing, and it will usually also go downhill very quickly, even if it looked nice at the start. Now, once they are about to start hatching, what I was hoping to show is just the little slit in the egg with a nose sticking out, but I guess this guy's kind of in a hurry to get moving. That right there is our first baby hybrid pine snake sticking his head out. Once they come out fully, we'll get some better looks at them, but yeah, right as they're getting ready to hatch, the veins in the eggs will basically disappear, and you'll get the egg tooth that the snakes have on the tip of their nose will slice open their egg. I think this guy's actually already lost his egg tooth. If not, it'll be in the little bump right at the tip of their snout right there. It falls off really quickly after hatching, though. But it has begun. And now, it's been a little more than a week, and they have all had their first shed. Here is all 5 of them. There's a fair bit of variation in these guys. Some of them are a little darker, some a little lighter. Some have really clean patterns, others have a lot of little blotchies going on. Going to be finding out what the sexes are of each of them and get them fed soon. And this is actually where the hard part of raising babies comes in, is making sure everybody has an appropriate space up until they find new homes, making sure they're all feeding well, and then of course finding them appropriate homes, because especially with these guys, it's not just making sure that we find a place where the people have all the proper setup and know-how to care for them, right? But also making sure that they go to responsible people who know how to deal with hybrid babies. So we'll get to that in just a second. So the hardest part when it comes to dealing with the babies is not the incubating or the hatching out, but in fact everything that does come afterwards. So getting them to feed, getting them to find new homes, and so on. I got lucky with these guys, and they all ate on the first time I tried, so that part is going to be easy for this clutch, but it's not always that way. It's quite frequent you will have babies in a clutch that don't want frozen thawed food right away, or they don't even want to just eat right away. So sometimes you have to try live, or just keep trying time after time again. Sometimes you have to look for other food items, such as maybe pinky rats instead of mice, or using perhaps tiny button quail. A lot of snakes like to eat lizards when they're really young, so for some species that's necessary. Others, little tricks like dipping the pinkies in tuna, or boiling them, or cutting open the top of the head so that the smell of the brain actually gets out. It's called braining the pinky. All those sometimes work, sometimes don't. Sometimes with babies you have to deal with force feeding if they really don't want to take it any other way, because you got to kind of force them into getting a head start so that eventually they start eating on their own. And of course, when you're working with babies, there's always the risk you may just have one that never wants to feed, never wants to really work out, will not thrive. And in that case, you have to decide at what point is it right to consider euthanasia, or I have a lot of other snakes here that will actually eat other snakes. So if I have a baby that just for months and months and months has not been working out, perhaps it'll just become a meal for another snake. It's part of the circle life. It's something that has to be dealt with if you're going to deal with living animals. There's always going to be hardships. Luckily, with this clutch, doesn't look like there will be. Although, interestingly, it appears that this clutch was predominantly male. There was only one female, and she's going to be the one that I'm going to hold back. She's not the darkest yet, but being that they have a black pine for a mother, they are going to darken up a lot. So, say hello to Nimona. She is perhaps the gentlest of the group, and also possibly the biggest. Certainly a beautiful animal already, and in just a couple of months, I will bet you every single one of her blotches here will turn solid black, so she will become an extremely high contrast animal. Hello! Now, it's probably time to start talking about the controversies that come with this little clutch of snakes. There's quite a few, starting from just the fact that I'm breeding snakes at all. It's always kind of a touchy subject. Everyone who gets into snakes, that idea will probably come into their head. There's not a whole lot of people that keep snakes as pets and just as pets, although they are out there, and we greatly appreciate them, and we need those sorts of people in order to take the animals that maybe really shouldn't be bred and just have them as pets. So if you're going into breeding just for the money, don't do it. You're not going to make a whole lot of money off of breeding snakes unless you really cut corners with care or other general processes that really need to be kept up with for animals. It's going to be a labor of love. You will, at best, often just barely make even. In fact, all the plants you see behind me, I sell these in order to kind of keep up with the animals. That helps a lot. Breeding these guys for money is just not going to work out. Now, the other thing is, of course, these are hybrids. And they are a hybrid involving their mother is a species on the endangered species list under the threatened section. So this brings up all sorts of what some people consider to be potential issues. There are some reasons why I did this, actually to kind of test the female. And overall, it looks like she's testing out as probably having pretty good genetics, so her little tail kinks may just be aesthetics. Something weird happened during incubation or just as she was hatching out. So it's probably not something that's genetic, because none of these guys really have much of a sign of that. They are perfectly healthy, happy animals. There's no real tail kinks. There's one male that has like a single small kink, and that again could just be an environmental thing. So it's not enough to actually say that she is bad for breeding. So that's one thing that I did this for, is I wanted to test the female and not having another male and not wanting to necessarily put out bad pure black pine snakes into the environment, or into the trade, because other people would most likely breed those. We did this as a test to make animals that are not going to be bred, and we can just figure out, is she good for breeding? And it looks like she may very well be. So in the future, once I get more space, my own place hopefully, and I can afford to get another black pine, hopefully I can get a different lineage, good bloodline, so that we're outcrossing, keeping diversity in, and hopefully breed some good, healthy, beautiful, pure black pine babies. A lot of people have concerns about just hybrids in general. They believe that it's unnatural. That's entirely untrue. There's hybrids that occur in the wild all the time between all sorts of species. In fact, it's more uncommon for hybrids to actually be sterile or to not occur at all between closely related species than it is for them to happen on occasion. You'll see, there's even been a gopher snake, king snake hybrid recorded in California once. Hybrids between the different species of gopher snake, or the subspecies, of course, they happen quite frequently wherever those species might encounter each other. Oftentimes, there are geographic limits. The species are separated physically, so they won't encounter each other, and that won't happen. But in small areas where they do come across each other, they will integrate. So it is a natural thing. If you are breeding hybrids, of course, there is the concern that as they go out there, unless you keep all those animals through their entire lifespan, there's you can't fully guarantee that somebody won't take them and breed them out themselves, perhaps to other hybrids, or try and breed them back to either parent species and then sell those babies off as pure species when they're not. There is that risk. But there's also that risk when it comes to any animal that is produced. You may find people who will breed ball pythons, just pure ball pythons, and there are all sorts of rampant stories about mislabeling there, where people sell it as one morph when it's another, or as being het for something that it turns out not to be, or just blatant terrible practices. That just comes kind of with the territory. If you're going to be in a trade, if you're going to be in a business where you're making money, there's always going to be people who will try and make money in unethical ways. Dealing with hybrids really doesn't change that. A lot of people don't like that idea because then there's the risk of like polluting the bloodlines in captivity, and they want to keep things pure. In the end, though, in captivity, really, it's mostly a matter of preference, because these are not generally animals that are ever going to actually end up going back into the wild ever. It's just what the person wants to have in their own collection. The people who are actually working on breeding programs for like the endangered species and such, they will very closely monitor what animals they are working with. They will trace black bloodlines to the nth degree. They will make sure that the animals that they are working with, that they are getting, are in fact pure species that they are going to be using for breeding programs and reintroduction to the wild, so they avoid the risk of hybrids. You can test these genetically, of course, and they will do so with a lot of those animals, especially if they're an animal that's it's a real big concern that you don't want polluted bloodlines getting into the wild. So these guys, and most of the snakes that are out there, that includes most of the black pines, most of the eastern indigo snakes, and so on, all those other threatened species that are in the trade, they are going to be pets. And that is really the biggest concern, is are you making animals that are healthy enough to be good pets? So these guys, of course, they are very active, they are healthy, they are curious animals. They have the potential to live 20, 30 years in the right conditions. They could be very good pets for a very long time for someone. And in the pet trade, most of it is concerned with, 1, general health of the animal, 2, appearance. Someone who likes the look of the snake will take it as a cool pet. So it's not really a concern when it comes to like polluting bloodlines, endangered species, other than when you're talking about people who have like purity preferences, which is just oftentimes kind of comes from a bit of an elitist perspective. There are cases, of course, and again, this goes with even working with pure species, when people will mislabel stuff or breed back things that they shouldn't and produce bad bloodlines and such. That happens everywhere. It's not really something that's special when it comes to the hybrids themselves. So, overall, it all comes down to kind of personal responsibility, making sure that these guys are being produced under ethical circumstances and are going to people who are going to care for them and use them in an ethical way. These could be very good educational animals for other people who might be doing programs like that, talking about the genetics and the relatedness between different species. People who want to work with pure breeding lines, they're not going to pick these up. And I am going to try and make sure, as best as I can, that the other 4 babies will go to people who are not going to breed them, and or at least certainly not breed them back to the pure parent species and try and label them, sell them off as such. I can make sure to vet their credentials. I can look online, find out what kind of reputation they have, what kind of practices they have been doing, make sure that they understand the risks of dealing with these animals, and make sure that these guys go to the homes that are best for them, both in care and in making sure that they don't end up risking projects for somebody else somewhere down the line. It's all about kind of personal responsibility, personal care, making sure you know where the animals are going, and that's something that should kind of be practiced with any pets, any animals that you produce. You want to make sure that they are going to the best homes, that they are going to people who will take care of them responsibly and ethically, not just turn around and flip and sell them again, or label them as something that they're not. So certainly, I'm sure that I have missed a couple of the details concerning a lot of the controversy around these guys, but if you have questions, if you have points that you want to bring up, please do so in a respectful manner down in the comments, and I will try to answer as best as possible. If you're rude about it, then I will simply delete the comment. I will ignore it, because we don't need hatred. We don't need antagonism in the reptile community. We need to work together. There's enough struggles already with this, with just taking care of snakes in general. A lot of people don't like it, and they're already trying to go at our throats for that. So working between each other with other reptile enthusiasts, be respectful. If you disagree, voice that disagreement in a respectful manner. Try and ask for clarification. Understand that there are people with different perspectives, different reasonings for why they do what they do. I wanted to make sure that my female was a healthy animal. I wanted to see the beautiful babies that will come out of this, because if you look online, this is a cross that has been done before, and the results, I think, are absolutely beautiful. They look a lot like those really dark, almost black and yellow Kankakee bull snakes, but with slightly different, thicker patterns, you could say. And so that is an absolutely gorgeous animal when they're grown up. And that's something that I kind of wanted in my collection, and I also wanted one of these guys as a great educational tool. It's a hybrid. That's something that people don't really think about day to day when they think about animals in general, let alone snakes, and it's something that we can teach with. So this girl we'll be seeing definitely more on possibly this channel. You'll certainly see her on social media, so you can always find me there, Carlton Carnivores, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and so on. She will definitely be a feature in the future. If you enjoy educational videos like this, learning about caring for the animals, learning about the different kinds of animals that we work with, learning about the plants that you can see in the background here, all these carnivores, you can consider joining us to help support at patreon.com/hcarlton. Members there do get special benefits back, including access to the seed contest that I do every month. There's merchandise, early access to the videos, or you can do one-time donations at Coffee. You can buy merchandise at Teespring, or the plants and sometimes baby snakes that are on the website at carltoncarnivores.com. If you can't support financially, though, simply giving attention to the channel, sharing the videos, liking the videos, subscribing to the channel, leaving comments, all of that interaction helps grow the audience here, grows the reach, and helps me get a little closer to starting to monetize this to help support these guys even better. And you can always find more information on the website. The database and blog are there. And of course, more tidbits are always on social media. But until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton. This is Nimona, our newest member of the family. And this is Carlton Carnivores.